Hello everyone. It's been quite an interesting week. The last video I made was sort of a not a casual video, but I didn't put all that much thought into it. Had to do with guns for the end of the world, and this turned into Guns of the World Part 2 just because of the response I received from you, not just through the channel, but other people I know, friends and so forth, and I was surprised how much thought people have given exactly this scenario. So just to reiterate, we were talking about what guns it might not be a bad idea to have around when things go wrong, or rather everything goes wrong. There's no power, there's no water, the roads are clogged, the cars have all stopped, electric cars especially, because there's no electricity. Your cell phone doesn't work, your TV doesn't work naturally, all electric things have failed, and we're told by the authorities that we should be prepared to last for 72 hours with food and water for ourselves and so forth, and we can all do that. The scenario that people were presenting to me, it was what happens past the 72 hours, what do we do then? And there were all kinds of dramatic suppositions and ideas that people had, and no one knows exactly what happens. I mean, ideally, and some people wrote this to me, that nothing bad happens, that people don't turn immediately into some kind of vicious survival mode, and quite a few, or some writers suggested that should things go entirely wrong, then we ought to return to faith and trust in God. And I suppose that's always true. We don't have to wait for the end of the world, whatever that means. Some people corrected me that the world never ends. It's a good point. Human beings may end. I guess the dinosaurs ended, although we have relics of what they used to be in birds and so on, or that's the theory. And but the planet doesn't end. In fact, they sent me how old the planet is, and it's 4.5 billion years old or more. And the planet seems to be largely indifferent to what lives on the planet. Doesn't have any effect on really anything, because all the materials that are here were always here. I guess we've received some space dust and meteors over the millennia, and I think we probably sent some satellites out there, so there's been minimal gain and loss of material, but overall I think they're quite accurate in what they write me, and these seem to be learned people, that we shift around the ingredients of the planet, and like we pull our lives in many ways just out of the soil, and then we have to return our lives to the soil one way or another, whether it's through ash or what have you. So it's just a machine beyond our comprehension. Anyway, that doesn't obviously have to do with what guns are good in the end of the world, but people had a lot of thoughts on this, so I thought I'd share them with you. So basically we're talking about a scenario where the environment on the planet, due to a meteor or possibly a nuclear accident, people wrote with different ideas about how they pictured this so-called end of the world happening, which I guess is more accurately the end of human beings or civilization. Anyway, getting back to that original point, and I apologize in advance, I've got like 5 pages of notes which I turned into 1 page of really bad notes, so I have to paint with like broad strokes, but by now you'll get the idea of what I'm after. So moving from the philosophical and profound to the practical, I was corrected, and I am corrected. It's true. The Mauser 98 won't last. It's not going to last hundreds of years. Well, it could. Again, the firearm may be capable of working, but there probably won't be ammunition. 2 or 3 people wrote me and said that I'm old-fashioned, which is probably true. The Mauser 98 is not the one to think about. It's the AK, because there are 75 or 100 million AKs on Earth. I had an AK on the table before the first filming, and I took it off the table because those semi-autos, they by definition use a lot of ammunition, and I don't know, 25 years out or 50 years out, I suppose they could still be working. And by the way, as a humorous aside, I went on YouTube, and it may be surprising to you that I'm not on YouTube very much. And I saw people like baking guns and putting guns in puddings and in mud puddles and driving over them. I guess I couldn't watch the whole video. Not that they were that bad, but really interesting. So I mean, like a pistol in a lasagna and stuff like this, and then they would take it out and it would still work. But that's not the end of the world. That just somehow came to mind. So then people mentioned their personal preferences, and like I said, I'm veering all over the place here. They said the 870 is not as good as the Mossberg 500. I had a few more 8K comments, so I talked about that one. I don't doubt that there are 100 million of them or 75 million. But I mean, 100 years out, will you find 7.62 by 39? That ammo gets used up quickly, like right now, because of the gun and the rate of fire. If you're restricted by a bolt action, you tend to shoot less, and you tend to shoot more effectively. But again, you may not be entirely right. But the next thing I'm going to say, which comes from you, voids all that. So get a hold of whatever you think will work. A Mossberg 500. Had a few notes about the Lee Enfield being better than the Mauser 98, removable magazine, 10 shots, so on. Maybe true, I don't know. Some people said slingshots are good. I know they are. I'm not sure they compare with a Mauser, but anyway. And then the people correctly said eventually and quickly ammunition will be very scarce or impossible to get. Of course, nobody's going to be making ammunition. And again, I'm not talking about a scenario where we're waiting for the return to law and order and a normal, functioning, civilized world. I'm talking about where there is no return. So that's what people wanted to talk about in the first place. So they said flintlocks are the way to go. They skipped over percussion rifles and shotguns because you need the percussion cap and so on. With a flintlock, it's true, you could probably somehow for a long time get a hold of charcoal, sulfur, and saltpeter, or whatever the formula is, and make some black powder. And then, as the name says, flintlock, you just need flint or something similar to get the firearm to work. But people still took it further and said eventually that's not going to work for whatever reasons, rust, or you can't get the ingredients. And they said the bow and arrow is probably the only way to have a weapon, or a crossbow. And I actually don't have a decent bow and arrow. I couldn't believe it. I have these fiberglass things, and they're like green and red, so I thought it doesn't look very good on the table. So I put out, just for fun, I put out some flintlocks I had around, and this is an ages old London Police Department flintlock. But anyway, here's a crossbow. I guess it's a Rhino or something, made in England. Very good, and that'll last a long time. Of course, the cables will fail, and people told me all kinds of things about cams, and frankly things I would have to study in order to repeat coherently in a video. But those are well-made points, and what they're, I guess, trying to get across to me is that ultimately we'll return to, spears and whatnot. But I had, just because of my channel being interested in firearms, that's what I originally focused on. But I do appreciate the amazing thought, and like I said at the outset, I couldn't really believe how much I learned from all of you that did write or contacted me one way or another. Some people pointed out that the true commodity will be rifle barrels and ammunition. You can make actions and so on, but barrels are hard to find. Money will be worthless. Got that a few times. That's obviously true. Power structures will be reversed. Everybody with stocks and bonds and cash will have nothing. All of the people that control most of our society will have no material value at all. And what will be of value, practical skills. And there were some concerns about youth not knowing how to do anything, like work with hammers and saws. How do you make something? The electronic world guarantees that almost none of our knowledge is preserved or transferable without electricity. So some people said books would become a scarce commodity, and along with ammunition and food, of course, and water. Roads will be impassable. I'm repeating myself here. You can make gunpowder. I talked about that. Some people wrote, actually heartbreaking and quite long, explanations of what happens, and I could tell from the way they wrote that they had been through this. So apparently when it gets really bad, the people just don't go out. They don't go outside, because if they do, if they leave their shelter, they either will die or they probably will die. So they stay inside, and then they run out of food and water, and this was written more than once. I'm not sure where this person was from, but I think this is what they went through, and the people just become exhausted and have no food or water, and then they go to sleep apparently and expire. They just don't make it, and then they're found later on. So that's a kind of a sobering thought. Some people wrote about everything combustible will be burnt, so because there's no, in cold places you have to heat, so everything is going to be used for fuel, so that makes sense. Others wrote, well, there's no hope for people with guns just running around hoping to have ammunition, and we have to somehow cooperate again. That's very true, and of course, wonderful. I hope that that's what happens. On the other hand, we've got pretty good conditions right now, and I'm not sure we have community and cooperation as it is, but anyway. Urban areas will fail first. This was some urban planner. I don't doubt that. The supply chain will be broken. The ships that are at sea, whenever the bad thing happens, may not dock, depending on what's on board. So you have ships bobbing around the ocean or anchored, or shouldn't laugh. This is a terrible tragedy. One interesting, wind farms. You know what I'm talking about. That would be an interesting basis for new communities, because if you somehow could tap into that electricity, then you could kind of start again. More fuel is the commodity, so that one we've covered. Some people wrote about cannibalism. I don't know what to say about that. Our knowledge is on cell phones and PCs, so that's going to all be lost. We basically won't know anything. If you're lucky, you could find a book somewhere to explain to you how to do something. And we talked about AKs. An interesting one was on the probability of this happening. I never thought of this one, but apparently if you look at the moon or Mars or any planet, they're terribly pockmarked. You can see evidence of bad things having happened. And you look at Earth, and it looks like we rarely have any kind of impacts. But evidently, we are full of the same damage. It's just that we're covered with water. So there are some impact craters on land, and those can be seen in Arizona. They sent me all the details. It's too much to repeat here. But I don't doubt that. So I think it's inevitable that something will happen. Some people asked if I felt the current world balance of power will last forever, like the United States and other superpowers that might be around. Well, Rome doesn't exist anymore. Ancient Egypt, we have to go look at pyramids. The planet is effective at eradicating everything very quickly, because it follows a different equation. Like I said earlier on, living things, every living thing has a very tough time surviving here, which is probably why we're so adversarial. And then even while we're living, we're dying, because ultimately every living thing dies. So the planet, if it was a conscious entity, wants us dead for whatever reason. So that's getting into some kind of other realm of thought. But we're talking about the practical person who just wants to live sometime when things go wrong. And I liked all your comments. The practical ones were very easy to understand. A bow and arrow, a little challenging. I have trouble hitting anything, but I suppose I could. Crossbows are good. Flintlocks are good. All those kinds of thoughts. Lee Enfields, I agree. People talked about, caves and tunnels and all kinds of other considerations that would be valid, because you can't just survive with a firearm. You have to be somewhere where you can shelter from the planet and from whatever else is out there. So like I said at the beginning, that's a very disorganized video, but it's some kind of summary of everything and maybe something to think about. I know some of the comments definitely made me think, and hopefully I did justice to whatever you wrote me. And if you want to, we can do an End of the World Part 3 if you're not sick of the subject, but it seems to be something that maybe one fellow said, this is the end of the world, which was like, these are the end days. So I thought, well, I mean, it could be, no one knows. Anyhow, that's it. Thanks very much for watching, and I look forward to your messages and comments as always. And in the meantime, I guess we should be grateful that we're here and the lights are still on. All right, take care.